Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us to the Oxford Internet Institute, Internet Politics and Policy Conference. Now we are hosting our second session that is going to be about the gig economy perspectives. We have 4 different speakers in this session. First, Rajesh Gupta, who's director in NITAI Ayog, India. He is there is a researcher in the Random Forest. And then we have Dr. Manpreet Arora from Central University of Himachal Pradesh, Dharamshala, India. We also have Swati Palanishami from the Department of Business and Management at Christ Dimtubi University from Belanguru, India. And also we have Priyan Krishna Mohanty, who's assistant professor at the Department of Business and Management, also for Christ Dimtubi University from Bengaluru, India. May I yield the floor to Rajesh Gupta.
Thank you, and very good morning to the hosts and good afternoon to the panelists. I don't know, but it's by design or by coincidence that all the panelists in this session are from the same place. I'm in the same country, but okay. At the outset, I would like to mention that I'm going to present on the findings of a qualitative research that I did last year. I mean, that was done pre-COVID, but published last year. I am a practitioner, not an academician like rest of the panelists. And the views expressed here are solely mine personally, nothing to do with my organization. Since I work for the government, it's important for me to raise this disclaimer. I hope the presentation is visible. Is my PDF visible?
Yes, it is.
It's on full screen also?
Yes.
Oh,
we can see a PDF.
Yeah, okay. So here I'm going to talk about the employment in gig economy, some perspective findings based upon the paper that I did with my co-author, who's not present here. I mean, the paper got published last year in the South Asian Journal of Human Resources. So starting how gig employment is different compared to the traditional employment. We see them all around, right? That those food delivery boys, the cab drivers. But think about it, how many faces we remember. Probably we have taken hundreds of deliveries from these people, but I mean, would you be able to recall a single person's face? So this is a particular characteristic of this job, that this is by nature kind of faceless. So risks and rewards involved in this particular job, they are not mapped in the traditional employment. They are also the gig workers. They are not as socially connected as the rest of the workers are. Regulations are evolving and so is technology. So our study took off from Prasel's work, where they characterized gig work or platform work where humans are used as a service and labor is just a technology aspect. It's no longer a factor of production, but a technology aspect. So how many of them are there in India? The global figure is still not available, but maybe some attendees or panelists might throw some more light on it. In India, we for sure know that there are about 400 million plus who have access to internet. The data rates are cheap. In fact, India happens to be one of the cheapest data providers in the world, as low as $0.17 per gigabytes. app-based food delivery market in India is estimated to be of 8.16 billion USD, and it's growing at almost double-digit rate. It's not, the gig work is not treated as gig workers are not considered as employees, but delivery partners. This is another peculiar feature. And there's, as of now, there's no regulation on this, that whether they should continue to be treated as delivery partners or regular employees. Though we'll come to some legal aspects, etc., in a while. And we do not have exact data on how many of them are there. But in our study, we referred to some secondary literature, and we tried to arrive at a number. So it's like a spectrum. We can think of a number like 3.4 million to 7.7 million, right? So since the study period was like 2019, so in these 3 years, the way COVID contributed to increase in the gig work, we can imagine that there could be anywhere between 10 to 12 million gig workers in India at the moment. So gig workers are categorized in two streams: those who use internet-based platforms, those who don't use internet-based platforms. The latter are more, in fact, double of the former. So here we are focusing, say, primarily on platform gig workers. Platform gig workers are those gig workers who are freelancers, but based on some technology platform. For example, the food delivery services that we have, the cab services we have, the courier services we have. Now more and more products are being offered as services. So the grooming, the beauty services, the plumbing, machinists, etc. Even certain medical services are also available on platform these days, including the prescription tests, etc. So how do we define in India a gig workers? So the latest social security code, which is a latest latest law of the land on gig work, it defines as a gig worker as a person who performs work or participates in work arrangement and earns from such activities outside of traditional employer-employee relationship, a kind of academic definition that you find in most of the literature also. And platform workers is somebody who's doing this on a tech platform or internet-based platform. Added to this is the requirement by the law that every such worker shall be required to get registered to get covered under welfare schemes for organized workers. The rules are not yet clear on how this registration is going to be take place. That is, who is going to have the onus of registration. That's not there. Coming to the literature, I won't make the session boring by talking about each of them, but there are interesting papers, though few of them, on the behavioral aspect of gig workers. So here we are talking from the point of view of the gig workers, how they feel and how it manifests in their behavior. So there are at least 6-7 good papers, well-cited papers on them. So what we did in our work, we did some unstructured interviews, group interviews, and also took note as participant observer, the technique as described in Frey and Fontana 1991. We did this exercise, the interviewing, the discussion exercise with the family members of gig workers, their friends also. The sample size was not very large because the time we started doing this work, by the time we were kind of progressing ahead, the COVID hit, and we had a sample size of 42 workers, 21 family members additionally. So this is kind of demographic profile we had for our sample. And the method we followed was dimensionality analysis. After initial coding, we did something called as reflective coding. Then we arrived at dimensional matrix formulation, and then the analysis and interpretation part began. So coming straight to the findings, so we were able to unpack the perspectives, the processes, and the consequences of gig work. So it emanates from the basic perspective from most of the gig workers we got at they do not know their boss. So who is their boss? The boss is that mobile screen which is giving them command to pick some delivery. So this work was done on food delivery boys. Uh, yeah, so for them the boss is just a screen, and that emanates into a process of merger of their identity with the identity of the screen, and it has serious cognitive and psychomotor implications which are presented like this, that the mobile phone dependence, the automobile dependence, and the occupational response put together, generate a dehumanization characteristic in the behavior of the gig workers. Now, if we relate this finding with the existing literature on dehumanization, we could see that it is emanating as a response to cope with the stress and fear. In our paper, I have not put that in the slide, that in our paper we have separately figured out what are the stress factors that a gig worker faces. So in nutshell, we need to figure out how we can mitigate this negative psychological impact on the gig workers of working in a gig environment. Since a cab driver's platform is different than the food delivery boy's platform, and so on and so forth, so we cannot, the challenge here is that we cannot have a single mitigation strategy to help the workers of all the platforms. We need to customize it as per the platform. The platform design so far is if we talk to the software app developers who design them, it is designed to meet certain criteria like lowest delivery time, the maximum, the whole user interface is for the satisfaction of the customer. What about the gig worker himself? So the software design, the user interface optimized for maximum efficiency, which is a euphemism for profits of the platform, is lacking when it comes to the cognitive care of the worker itself. So this is a brief snapshot of what we did in our paper. So basically, the findings called for more questions rather than answering a few of them. Very few of them we could unpack, but still, it's a Pandora's box, to say the least, because you have on one aspect the technology to take care of, the other side you have to take care of the legality of it, how the legal framework or the regulatory framework can take care of gig workers without negatively impacting the ease of doing business or entrepreneurial spirit, without harming the entrepreneurial spirit. The third one is how society is going to cope with this particular phenomena of we have in India, for example, a postgraduate student working as a delivery boy. I'm knowing some of the students in Europe are also doing this, as well as somebody who's barely secondary school pass out doing the same job, but there's a clear trend towards joining the gig economy. There's a clear trend towards businesses offering more and more products as services. You can now order a furniture as a service. You don't have to buy it. You can now order utensils in your kitchen as a service rather than buying it. So where it's all going to take us to, of course, there are there are profits, there are efficiency gains involved on this, but is it actually the best social outcome that that the present scenario is heading towards? We are not yet sure, and that's why more primary research is required in this area, especially in emerging economies where the informal sector is already large. Vulnerabilities are more pronounced than in the OECD context, and the way the technology is changing, whether is it so I'm not sure whether the attendees or the hosts are facing the same scenario where even the perennial jobs which could have been a regular permanent jobs are now being converted into gig jobs. So this conversion aspect of the regular jobs into gig jobs plus new services coming into the market, it's opening a lot of challenge for the policymakers, that in which direction is it heading. So with that, I would like to end my talk, and if host desire that the discussion should be held at this time, I'm open to it. Otherwise, we can proceed for the next panelist also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have allocated around 10 minutes at the end of the presentations in order to receive some questions from the public. So now I yield the floor to Dr. Manpreet Arora, who's going to talk about integrating gig economy and social media platforms as a business strategy in the era of digitalization and post-truth, a perspective. You will have 15 minutes in order to share your knowledge on this topic.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And from my side, it's afternoon and it's going to be evening very soon. But maybe good morning to everybody and good afternoon or good evening to all who are listening to me. I'm Dr. Manpreet Arora. I'm from Central University of Himachal Pradesh, and I proudly represent the land of gods, that is Himachal. And today I'll be talking about how gig economy can be integrated as a business strategy so that the businesses are able to manage the situations which have arisen because of COVID pandemic. And we all understand that the businesses are not very sane and they are facing very much in terms of low cash flows, problems, and many businesses are even till now laying off people, which has started a new era of economy, which is generally regarded as gig economy. I'll not be keeping my presentation on the presentation mode because I like to see the panelists side by side. So you'll have to bear with me because I'll not be going into full screen. So first of all, this paper was published in a edited book of Springer, where I had done a sentiment analysis of how people in India are perceiving the gig economy to be. But in order to present, I have developed a perspective that how the scenario has changed the business economy and how the gig economy is now being integrated in the business models in order to handle the situations which have arisen because of COVID-19 pandemic. So we all understand that when we were grappling hard with the problems which were caused by COVID-19 pandemic for quite some time, it raised serious concerns as well as dilemmas for the policymakers in order to handle the situation in one way or another. in economic and business arenas, particularly when we try to look at the research or the data available from the various governments, we see that the supply chain activity was the major thing which suffered a severe jolt. On the other hand, if people depended a lot on social media, there was infodemics on social media at the time of crisis, and it flooded the world with fake news, opinions, half-truths, which again posed a serious challenge as well as problems to the governments, to the policymakers around the world, and how to deal with that fake news. In fact, many countries were impelled to even, shut down various kinds of activities on media in order to hold the crisis and not to spread the fake news. As a consequence, various businesses, they suffered a lot. Industrial growth has plummeted. Supply chain life was, I would say, lifeless to a great extent. Many companies, they were forced to have layoffs. Until now, they are not ready for the long-term commitments because of the costs. Labor contracts or the labor market has undergone serious change, and employers were, forced to sit back at the home, and the entrepreneurial curve all over the world has been seen to have a shift. So most of the developing economies, we could see an increase in entrepreneurial activities due to the change in the COVID-19 pandemic scenario. The same practice was seen in certain developed economies also, where people were trying to search for their own independent work rather than to seek a job in a company. So when we integrate a gig economy with the technology and the various social media platforms, we see that it can be a very important business strategy to stay alive and to grow sustainably in the modern businesses. In a sense, to gig is possible only when we have media multiplicity and we have a digital edge, because all these technologies are very important to understand that this economy can bring us benefits as well as various kinds of problems to the situations or the central problems of an economy. So if there is no digitalization or an increased use of digitalization, gigging will lose its meaning, I would say. So the change in the work, change in the expectation of the people, change in the newer concepts which are emerging like big data, artificial intelligence, crowdfunding, they have changed the perception of the labor economy as a whole. With higher digitalization, higher accessibility to the internet, and excessive use of electronic gadgets has made our life somewhat different as it was through 3 or 4 years back. And if we want to make it more workable, we need to use it more judicially and to integrate it with gig economy in order to pave way for certain integrated business strategies so as to deal with the diverse business situations which are very uncertain in nature. So I was reading certain articles on gig economy and I found these lines very interesting published in Forbes, that while there is no universal definition of gig worker, making them a difficult cohort to categorize. Some estimates predict that gig workers represent around 35% of the US workforce in 2020, up from 14 to 20% in 2014. That means roughly 57 million Americans currently engaged in some type of gig work that contributes more than $1 trillion to the US economy annually. Those figures are expected to grow, with some predicting that freelance workers will make up more than half of the US workforce by 2023. It was quite a big statement given in Forbes, which shows that we are going to have more interest of the academicians, researchers, to understand the peculiarities, challenges, as well as opportunities of this market. So in order to develop a perspective, I've stated 4 research questions. Why and how this gig economy has assumed sudden relevance in post-COVID-19 scenario across the world? How can integrating and blending business strategies be the only answer to the complex and economic problems that have arisen due to COVID-19 pandemic? What role does social media platforms play in enabling gig economy as an important engine of the growth? And what policy dilemmas, challenges will be faced by the governments in this era of uncertainty? So let me talk about this statement again published in Forbes that states job flexibility is more appealing and potentially more necessary than ever. And when we try to look at the benefits of the gig economy, the biggest benefit which people are talking about after COVID-19 pandemic is it offers you flexibility. It offers you the, ease of working hours and the type of job which you can fit into, you can easily locate on it. So a shift in the labor landscape can be seen, especially after pandemic. And we have also seen that now disruption culture has gained its importance. And the labor marketers or the people who work in labor markets, especially the academicians and the industrialists, they say that gig economy is a form of disruption. And this is an era where disruptive technologies have taken over the market. Moreover, the talent gap or the pool gap, which we experience or get during the gig economy, is very important, and people get on-demand professionals in an easy and efficient way. We were earlier seeing that only people who were food delivery boys or Uber, they were regarded as the players of the gig economy. But now there is a tremendous shift in types of jobs which we can see people are finding in this platform economy, in terms of benefits, in terms of office spaces, in terms of saving in the costs of trainings, in terms of finding the people sitting at the remote places. It is becoming highly relevant for those who want to cut down their cost and at least in cash, certain cash, while liquidity crisis was the major problem of all the most of the small businesses as well as the middle type of businesses. So people are now able to create their own work schedules. They are able to control their own life. They are able to control their own working. So they are saying that with this platform economy and the advantages which we are getting in this economy, they help us to create a more work-life balance. Networking has become very important in this crisis, and this whole concept of gigging, whole concept of platform economy, the short-term commitment, I would say, has become very important through networking. And when we see this Gen Z millennials, they have got a unique set of mindset over the period of time. They do not like to have long-term commitments. They want to be free birds. They want to work as whatever they like. So these things have necessitated us that gig economy has assumed a sudden relevance in the post-COVID scenario, and the cost pressures, layoffs, unemployment, networking, unique mindsets, all these are the contributing factors which have, increased the relevance of this concept. Let me show you another important aspect which I tried to compile from the various posts of the Twitter, where people were stating their sentiments regarding how they feel about gig economy. I made a word cloud out of that, and the reasons which I could explore from that data, almost 17,000 tweets. Most of the people were saying that they are getting easy cash, they are getting ease to work, they are getting increased participation in the work, they are more friendly to now digital platforms, they can commit easy things to the people, they can control their life. So all these things were very, very important, which came up with that Twitter analysis. Now, how can integrated and blended strategies can be the answer to the complex business problems that have arisen due to COVID-19? There was a time when people say that organizational agility is desirable, but now it is central to the survival of every organization. Digitalization is not just an acceptable solution to the problem. It has rather made a ground for everybody to create more business models which are creative, which are new, which are not based on traditional models. Most of the businesses, whether small, whether big, or the people who want to work as freelancers, they are tracking their expenses against the revenues, and gig economy as a supply chain source, as a platform where people can have short-term commitments or the contractual obligations. They are giving them a platform of focusing on cash generating models more as compared to the traditional models. Small margins to manage the slumps in the market have become important. It has become a platform to save your cost. It has become a platform to sell your product at once. Now businesses have to focus more on their operating plans rather than to focus on what their competitor is doing. Transparent communication has become the need of the hour to make this platform more beneficial for the organizations. How healthy relationships you maintain with the people is gaining importance because it's a time of networked, digitalized platform. How you well are able to manage your contractual obligations, how you can cut your cost, how you can save your layoffs. Gig economy can be the solution out of it. And in the short period, every business has got a priority to see that whatsoever is feasible for them in order to sustain in the market has become important. Gone are the days when people used to cover their fixed cost first and try to find out what would be the variable cost in order to find a break-even point in order to earn profits. Now people want to cut down their fixed costs. They want to control even their variable costs. And the gig economy with a mixed business model approach can be a solution where people can cut down their fixed costs of trainings, of having the infrastructural facilities, or electricity bills and other things. That's why remotely people were working from home, and most of the businesses are still trying to adopt that practice in order to cut down the cost. Now an increasing trend of business products or services can be seen in terms of customized products. Standardization is getting far from our mind. Customization to a higher level can be important for every business in order to generate easy cash. And for that, gig platform can be a very, very feasible business solution. And to deal with infodemic, false news, fake news, propaganda in this post-truth era is no doubt a very serious problem of this platform economy. But it is undeniable that gig economy has become an integral part of workforce, and social media is going to play a very important role in order to save your cost, in order to increase your connections, in order to stay out of the boundary of the time, in order to promote the level of self-employment, in order to get more entrepreneurial opportunities, more venture creations, engaging the workers. And diverse remote locations are now reachable. Ease of doing businesses is there. The modern technologies of the businesses, like what we are doing, we are reaching out to you people sitting at our homes. This is very, very important aspect of the pandemic, which has brought together the world. And it has no doubt brought the business people or the industrialists or the small people or the small venture capitalists to enhance their connectivity and find out more benefits of the economy in the time of crisis and after that also. Now, what exactly can be the political dilemmas or the policy dimensions or the challenges which will be faced by the governments for supporting the gig economy? As the earlier speaker also mentioned, that there are no set rules and regulations that how people will be registered. So in most of the nations, most of the gig economy platforms have job security issues again. Contractual violations are there. There are no set norms for working hours. The concepts of social security are coming up. Cooperative societies, they are coming up, that how to protect the rights of the gig workers. If there are no long-term commitments, the chances of frauds are there. There's no standardization of the product. There's no standardization of the service. The chances of exploitation are higher. The employment regulations issues are higher. And most of the people nowadays are also relating the gig platform with migrated labor. As in many countries, people migrate from here and there to get employment opportunities, which are having short-term obligations. So immigration issues and migration issue is again a challenge for those economies where the gig or the platform contributors or the players are immigrating from one country to another. So migration economies and which needs more policy intervention, governments which are facilitating trade or service across the border. And the last is transnational regulatory arrangements. So when we are talking about going overseas, providing platforms for the people to work on short-term commitments over the country, maybe on internet or maybe on through the remote platforms, what would be the transnational regulatory arrangements? We do not have such kind of regulatory arrangement till now. It's a big challenge for the gig platform. I think with this, my time is over and I like to wind up. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Now I yield the floor to Swati Palanichami. I'm sorry for the pronunciation. From the Department of Business and Management from Chris Deemed to be University, Bengaluru, India, along with Priyan Krishna Mohanty, also from the Chris Deemed to be University from India. They will talk about attitudes, perceived risks, and intention to use shared mobility among Gen Z in India.
I hope I'm audible. A very warm welcome to one and all present here. I am Swati Palanichami, a student from the Department of Tourism and Travel Management at Christ University, Bangalore, India. I am here today accompanied by my guide, Dr. Priya Krishna Mohanty, who is an assistant professor in the department, to present our paper titled Perceived Risk and Intention to Use Shared Mobility Among Gen Z, Understanding the Role of Attitude as a Mediating Factor. So coming to our agenda for the day, we'll start off the presentation with a brief introduction to our topic, followed by the objectives, literature review, hypothesis development, conceptual framework, methodology, data analysis and interpretation, mediation analysis, and finally discussions and conclusion where the relevance of this study will be highlighted. So what is a sharing economy? A sharing economy is an economic model in which goods and services are shared by individuals and groups. The sharing economy involves short-term peer-to-peer transactions that facilitate collaborate consumption. Sharing economies allow individuals and groups to make money from underused assets. In a sharing economy, idle assets such as parked cars and spare bedrooms can be rented out when not in use. It can be something as simple as offering a drive in between two cities. In the Indian context, platforms like Uber and BlaBlaCar have facilitated shared mobility and subsequently helped reduce congestion and emissions in major cities. So, coming to what the relevance of shared mobility is in the gig economy, companies act as intermediaries by charging a fee for every P2P exchange, which makes it simple, convenient, and reliable for both providers and consumers to participate in collaborative consumption. Ride-sharing platforms, as a part of the gig economy, provide a promising mode of transportation that contributes to economic and sustainable development by creating efficiency and convenience for users and providing through smartphone applications, allowing for flexibility in terms of time, economic returns, and enjoyment, and eliminating the need for technological companies to own devices as well as vehicles. For P2P markets to operate smoothly, adequate suppliers and consumers are necessary, and sharing economy must have the sharing economy firms must attract a substantial number of users for their platforms to match supply and demand effectively. Now let's jump into why we conducted such a study in the first place. A study conducted by Martinez Gonzalez and others found that Gen Z is well suited to participate in the sharing economy and has a positive attitude towards shared exchanges. Therefore, we decided to examine this with the adoption of shared mobility by Gen Zers in India. This study is an empirical research with a quantitative approach, and the data was collected from 318 Gen Z respondents who frequently use shared mobility platforms. For analysis of the same, we developed a structural equation model using SmartPLS. So coming to the research objectives of the study, through the study, we aim to 1. Determine the awareness that Gen Z has about shared mobility platforms in India. 2. Examine their participation in the sharing economy. 3. Analyze how environmental consciousness, social aspects, and economic benefits, along with perceived risks, affect their intention to use shared mobility platforms. And finally, 4, evaluate how perceived risks impact their attitude towards such platforms. So coming to the review of literature, I also wouldn't like to take a lot of time in this section, but I will cite the major authors. So referring to existing literature basically gave us a clear direction on how to proceed with the study. Tirachini found that the cost, ease of payment, avoiding drunk driving, reduced travel and waiting time are highly valued aspects of ride-hailing services. Existing works indicate that users' decision to adopt shared mobility is influenced by their perception of it as a sustainable mode of transportation, considering environmental and social aspects along with economic benefits. Dalpizol and others also found that ease of use, sustainability, and social awareness, along with the preference for temporary access over ownership, all drive collaborative consumption in car sharing. The study by Yi and Yan in China found that ride-sharing, shared bike services, and fast ride pooling reduce CO2 emissions and have positive energy savings. Moreover, Mataya and others found that attitude towards free-floating car sharing is influenced by environmental, social, as well as economic factors. Tirachini's review paper found that factors such as not having to search or pay for parking, ease of payment, comfort and security, variety of vehicle types, and perceived security against crime all affect consumers' intention to use shared mobility platforms. So this study will use similar indicators to measure Gen Z's intention to use shared mobility platforms in India. So in this slide, you can see the operational framework constructed for this study, which formed the basis of our questionnaire. The 5 constructs we set out to measure through our numerous indicators are environmental consciousness, social aspects, economic benefits, perceived risks, and intention. For each of the indicators, respondents were asked to rate their agreeability from a scale of 1, strongly agree, to 5, strongly disagree. So coming to the constructs individually, so for measuring environmental consciousness, 5 indicators were used to ask respondents if they think shared mobility reduces pollution and traffic, makes them feel like a responsible traveler, and whether using a shared vehicle is a sustainable mode of consumption, thereby reducing the exhaustion of natural resources. Likewise, to measure social aspects, 4 indicators were used to ask respondents whether shared mobility allows those who do not own a private vehicle to always have one at hand, provides greater security than public transport, improves the quality of travel compared to public transport, and if it makes them feel good, to avoid overconsumption and share resources. And to measure economic benefits, 6 indicators were used, wherein respondents were asked to what extent they agreed that shared mobility allows them to save money, access vehicles they wouldn't be able to drive, save time with easy payment, and only pay for usage time without having to worry about filling the tank, parking spaces, or about parking in general. So the 5 indicators that were used to measure perceived risks were used to ask respondents whether they think that using a shared mobility service can be complicated as vehicles may not be easily available, territorial coverage may be limited, or that there's a risk of not getting the desired vehicle at the desired time, and if they fear of not being able to familiarize themselves with different controls of different vehicles. And finally, coming to the most important construct, which is intention, 4 indicators were used to ask respondents if they will continue to use shared mobility platforms in the future, but also we wanted to see whether they would be willing to substitute the ownership of vehicles with shared mobility platforms. Therefore, we obtained some very interesting findings by measuring this particular construct. So coming to the hypothesis development of our study, we constructed 4 hypotheses with the constructs under consideration after reviewing the relevant literature. So hypothesis 1 is that Gen Z's attitude towards shared mobility platforms will impact their intention to use them. 2, perceived risks will affect Gen Z's attitude towards shared mobility platforms. Hypothesis 3, perceived risks will affect Gen Z's intention to use shared mobility platforms. And finally, hypothesis 4, Gen Z's attitude towards shared mobility platforms will mediate the relationship between perceived risks and intention to use. The figure on this slide demonstrates the conceptual framework that was initially proposed for this study. So as you can see, attitude towards shared mobility platforms is synthesized by environmental consciousness, social aspects, and economic benefits. The attitude so formed influences intention, and perceived risks also influences intention, and perceived risks has an indirect effect on intention, wherein attitude mediates the entire effect. So in this slide, you can see a figure which shows the lower order model that was proposed for this study. So the 5 constructs that we previously discussed, along with the relationships between them and a cumulative of 24 indicators are all represented in this slide. Here we have shown the higher model for the study. It is the same as the conceptual framework as you can see here, except that the indicators that we use to measure these constructs have all been represented here. So coming to the methodology of our study, this study primarily focused on the behavior and habits of Gen Z consumers who use shared mobility platforms, which include services such as car sharing, bike sharing, and ride sharing. To ensure that the data collected would be representative of the population being studied, a threshold criteria was established wherein required participants had to have an average of at least 5 trips per month via shared mobility platforms. To collect the data, we adopted a 2-stage process. The first stage involved creating a list of potential participants by frequently visiting prominent colleges with undergraduate courses during August 2022. These potential respondents were chosen after checking their date of birth on the college or any valid ID and upon confirming the minimum required criteria. Oral consent was obtained to engage in an online survey. And in the second stage, the questionnaire was sent across to these potential participants between September and October 2022. To ensure that participants completed the questionnaire in a timely manner, reminder calls were made on few occasions. Initially, 318 valid responses were retained for further analysis with a response rate of 45.4%. I think someone is on unmute. Dr. Mohanty, can you? Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so in this table, you can see the demographic profile of our respondents, wherein the relevant variables used were gender, educational qualification, area of stay, monthly expenditure level, and monthly travel expenditure level. So a noteworthy finding is that majority of the respondents, that is over 80% of them, were actually situated in urban locales. This can be attributed to the fact that most of our respondents were Gen Zers, who were actually students from universities, which again are located in urban cities predominantly. So here you can see the preferred mode of travel for the respondents and from where they hear about shared mobility platforms. As highlighted, for short distances, walking or cycling is mostly preferred. And for long distances, ride-hailing services like cabs, autos, two-wheelers, and so on are mostly preferred. However, only about 1/3 of the respondents chose this option, and it is closely followed by public transportation, as you can see here, and own vehicles. And when asked about where respondents heard about shared mobility platforms mostly, most of them responded that they heard it through social media sites, which could be apps like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. And YouTube advertisements also formed a substantial chunk of it. Now over to Dr. Mohanty to continue with the rest of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Yes, yes, thank you, Swati. So basically, we did, as Swati mentioned, that we did something called as the structural equation modeling, and in that previously, as mentioned, that reliability and validity are the two issues that we have to, take into consideration while we are considering that if the sample that we have collected actually can be generalizable or not. So for that, we did, various tests, and the results of the test are actually mentioned out here. So the first test, that is the external loading, that is, referred through the lambda, the minimum value should be more than 0.7. And as you can see that most of the, in fact, all of the variables or indicators that we had took had an lambda which is beyond 0.7, which suggests that the loadings were fine. It means the model was being represented properly, as it can be shown in the next slide that will be shown afterwards. Then comes to Cronbach's alpha, which is a measure of reliability. Cronbach's alpha should be more than 0.7, and as you can see in all the cases, it was more than 0.7 in majority of the cases. Somewhere in the case of social aspect, it was near 0.7, but still, given the sample size, the threshold limit was beyond that, and that's why it was good to take into consideration. In the case of reliability, also reliability is measured through composite reliability, which value should be more than 0.7. And as you can see that most of the factors had a value which is more than 0.7. Then validity of the statement is represented through AVE, which is average variance explained. It should be more than 0.5, and in all the cases it was more than 0.7. VIF is a value that basically shows that how are the how are these validity statements are getting above the threshold limit. Normally it should be less than 5, and as you can see here, in all of the places it is more less than 5, which is showing that the entire data set was having no reliability or validity issues. Please go to the next slide. Discriminant validity means if any validity is individually showing whatever it is supposed to show. So if you see EB to EB, it is 0.749, and other values are lesser than that. It means that EB was explaining, so all the indicators that we had taken for EB is actually is actually highlighting EB more than any other indicators that we have taken. So discriminant means how it is discrete from the other variables. So you can see that EB to EB it is 0.749, EC to EC it is 0.815, and subsequently in all the cases the loadings are actually higher than other indicators that we have taken in the study. Now coming on to the results of the structural model, that is the path analysis. We could see that the p-values, which should be less than 0.05 to reject the null, is supported across Gen Z's attitude towards intention. So basically we are saying that the first hypothesis, which is about Gen Z's attitude towards intention, is actually significant. Then perceived risk has a relationship with Gen Z's attitude. Again, that value is also significant. And finally, perceived risk has influence on the intention. So basically, intention is intention is being mediated. So if you see perceived risk to intention, which is direct relationship, this is also significant, but it becomes more significant when we mediate it through the Gen Z's attitude. Similarly, you can go to the mediation analysis. Yes. So this will make the things more clear. So if we see the total effects of perceived risk on intention, which is the direct relationship, it was previously the outer loadings were 0. So the total effect, okay. So the total effects were 0.26 and the t-value was 0.414. But the most important thing that we have to see here is the previously perceived risk to intention, the direct impact was 0.131, but the t-value was only 2.06. However, it was supporting, or it was actually significant. But if you see here, when mediated through Gen Z's attitude, the t-value is becoming 3.555, which suggests that when perceived risks are lower, intention to use will be lower. Intention to use will be more. But at the same time, if perceived risk is mediated through attitude, then intention to use will be more. I will tell that in a minute. Next slide, please. So these are basically the pictorial diagram of the structural equation modeling that we have mentioned. We can see out here that the loadings are quite good. Next slide. Here also we can see that you can go to the next slide, Swati. So here also you can see that if you see from perceived risk to intention, it is 0.39, which is still significant. But when mediated through, so when perceived risk is mediated through attitude to intention, it is also significant. So it is a case of partial mediation. What it means in the policy is what I will say in next slide. Please go to the next slide. So basically, it is saying first the results are indicating that environmental consciousness, economic benefits, and social aspects are which are the aspects of attitude and perceived risk have a significant impact on the Gen Z's intention. Second, it was found that Gen Z's attitude towards shared mobility platforms, which is formed by combining the constructs, has a significant impact. So directly, it has a significant impact, and indirectly also it has a significant impact when mediated through the attitude. So what it means in the case of policy documentation is basically we are actually saying that perceived risk has to be reduced, and how it will be reduced when the perception about safety and security will actually increase, then people will find that risks are lesser. Also, when we make the platform simpler, because many people find it more complex. It was the case of Gen Z, and still there were some of the people who said that we still find it a little bit complex. So when we make it simpler, then the perceived risk also goes down. So the intention to use goes up when the perceived risk goes down. Also, we wanted to tell that when we change the perceived risk, it also changes the attitude of a person. So basically, the person becomes much more socially conscious, the person becomes much more environmentally conscious, and these people go on to use the shared mobility more. So shared mobility as such, our if we have to club together all the findings that we have finding, so we are actually stating that shared mobility will give rise to shared consumption, and shared consumption will actually give rise to much more sustainable people. So that is the entire findings that we had found out. From the graph, we can see that there is a tough competition between Ola and Uber in terms of usage of the shared economy. And policymakers have to take, policymakers as well as companies have to take special measures to, develop ads that actually shows that when somebody is using shared mobility, they are not just using something which is economical, but they are also using something which is sustainable for the longer run. So, environmentally sustainable for the longer run and economically sustainable on the longer run, because the type of trickle down effect that we get out of the usage of shared mobility is in fact much more higher. So a person who uses shared mobility in fact gives rises to much more trickle down effect, and that's what the entire findings are. With this, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We haven't received any questions from the Huba app. I would like to ask to the in-person attendees if they have like any questions so far, or maybe in the Zoom also people can submit their questions. We still have around 10 minutes, so I will also would like to give the opportunity in case our speakers have like any final remarks they would like to share with us, around 2 or 3 minutes per person. That will be okay in case you consider it suitable.
I would really like to know your views as organizers about this session. That what do you perceive about the players of gig economy or the platform economies over there, and were the views which were, I hope everybody here is Indian, so are these views similar in your country also, or you find similar kind of experiences there also, or some kind of different opinions you find for such platforms?
I think there was discussions for for the in-person attendees, would you like to share anything? You can totally come here.
So found it quite interesting, your comments with the new policy you were mentioning of 2020 in India regarding the gig economy. I'm a law student here in the UK in London at Northeastern, and we were actually studying in our employment law class the gig economy and how it works. And I was quite interested to know in India if there's only a definition for the gig workers or if there's any protection for them, because here in the UK it's a bit different. It's, you know, they do not have all the type of protections as they're not employees of the company.
No, there's no standard definition over here also. People use different pretext for different kind of people. If somebody is into contractual obligations, they say it independent contractors. If they are using, you know, food delivery chains or something like that, then it's common. They are called as platform economy, sharing economy. There is no unanimous view about how these people are perceived to be. Everybody has their own way of expressing them, and it depends from work to work. But when I was studying the literature, people are trying to, you know, put them into four categories. One is which is very much into digitalization, and they are into independent contractors. The other is like food delivery or Uber or some such kind of platforms. The other is mushrooming, like they are using digital platforms for giving their services. And the fourth one is content developers, or the people who share a kind of content on digital platforms. They are also coming into these categories. So there's no standard definition of gig economy or gig worker or a platform economy or a shared economy or an independent contractor. Nowhere.
All right, thank you. I had
No,
one more question.
I would like to just comment upon
Yeah.
here that as far as legal point of view is concerned, the law now defines who is a contract worker, who is a gig worker, and who is a platform worker. The ambiguity arises when it comes to the social protection. So, as far as India is concerned, the social protection net by by and large excludes the informal sector, and we have a large informal sector. Close to 80% of the economy is informal. The situation is a little different in OECD, including UK, because the platform companies want these gig workers to be classified as independent contractors or delivery partners, which means self-employed, not as an employee. In UK, I believe they have put some restriction that now you cannot call them independent contractors, but dependent contractors. So it's now, if you see, it's a spectrum now. On the more stringent side, you have a law which is in California at the moment, which calls them strictly employees. They are not contractors at all, they are employees. Then there are, on the other hand of the spectrum, they are treated as independent contractors in most of the countries still. And somewhere in between, you have the UK law, which calls them the dependent contractors. So it's still a wide spectrum, all focused at how the social security and the labor welfare can be ensured.
That's good. Quick question.
Also, can I join in? So basically, I have been working on this working paper in which a very interesting finding that has come out is the financial performance of these companies that are actually employing these gig workers are going through a turmoil since the last, post-pandemic phase. So as to say, if you see the companies like Swiggy or Zomato, they are actually running in losses, and they are, when they run in losses, the money that is given to the, or the salary, it's not salary. So the compensation that the person gets from the company is getting reduced day by day. And there has been 2-3 studies also that are actually suggesting that this is going to be a serious problem in the future also, because as such there is no such type of, as sir said, that there is no such type of provisions to understand that what are the social, social initiatives that are taken into consideration while these people are getting into this informal economy. So some researchers also believe that if suppose these companies are continuing to be going into this losses, this problem can be a, much more severe problem in the future. So I would really like to, listen from Rajesh sir, if you can, throw some light on that issue.
So it all depends upon how much we are. There's a trade-off. The trade-off between the innovation, the tech innovation, which can translate into the entrepreneurial spirit, and the bargaining power of the labor. So in this context, if you provide more bargaining power through traditionalizing the gig economy, then the entrepreneur suffers. There's less incentive for innovation, the tech innovation. On the other hand, if you give a free hand to the entrepreneur, then the labor welfare is compromised. So as I said, that there's a spectrum of regulation on this. Unless we have more studies which can give us evidence into which regulation is working good, which needs to be tweaked, where the existing laws are to be modified in favor of both the entrepreneur and the gig worker. There's another aspect, say gender aspect of it. It is also some studies revealing that gig work is disfavoring women, because it invariably most of the time requires owning a vehicle which you can use to deliver the service, right? It also means delivering the service at the premise of the customer, right? So instead of a workplace which is less insecure for women. So the employer-employee relationship, the principal-agent relationship, and that innovator and the regulator relationship. So it's the whole regulatory issue is playing around in many countries, and until we have more evidence of what exactly is working well, what is not working well, it's difficult to give a judgment in favor of any of such regulation.
Thank you very much for your valuable insights about this topic. Now, I will proceed to close this second panel. It has been such an enriching discussion, and we look forward to hearing from your further scholarship. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.